I sound great. I really would love to have the recording. I like to show it to my family. They have a lot of counter-narratives that they would like to share. How's everyone doing? Second day? Everyone good? Got some good energy? Well, I'm really excited to kind of share a little bit about this book. We just launched it about 6 weeks ago, and so it was hot off the presses, and you all have a copy. And the reason I wrote this book is because I built this company over a long period of time and in really the aftermath of the dot-com bust. And hopefully we don't have a similar AI bust soon, but I really wanted to demystify a lot of the nitty-gritty behind building a startup that moved away from the story of if I get X million dollars or X $100,000, then my problems are solved, then I can kind of build something. And what I hope to do in this book is explain, weaved in with my own story and being quite honest in terms of what advantages and disadvantages were going on, some frameworks and ways to think about it. The number one thing is realizing I wrote a story, not the story. And it's very easy to read all the startup literature out there and say, that's the formula, that's the way. Or because I'm software, I need to do it this way. Or defense tech, I need to do it this way. Or one way applies all. And the reality is it doesn't. The answer, it really, really varies. And so by sharing stories and sharing this particular story, you can perhaps cherry pick and figure out what things might apply and what things don't apply. Does this sound good? I also love questions. Back in the day, I used to be a teacher of middle schoolers. I've hung around this crowd a little bit. It's somewhat comparable, some of you, so hopefully you do a very good job. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to breeze through like really the highlights, and then we're going to go ahead and answer a lot of questions. What's really exciting to me about this as well is often I speak with founders, and what's intrigued me so much, particularly in the last 10 years since I sold the company, is talking about ecosystems and how do we help build the ecosystem, which is why I'm so excited about this conference and participating. But I did want to ask a quick question. In the room here, how many of you are more based on building out the ecosystem versus a founder? All right, very good. All right, good, so a nice crowd. So we can address whatever when we get to questions. Sound good? All right, now I got to figure out technology. You think I'd have a good handle on it, but okay. So the highlights. So Bronto was my 15-year overnight success story. And I put those things together is because from the time I quit my job at Red Hat back in 2000 in early days, it took me about 15 years before I actually was able to build a business and sell it successfully to a company called NetSuite, which was publicly traded, then became part of Oracle. And the reason I use the term overnight success story is because in articles, when you read these things, it seems like someone just thought something up, they spent some time, and next thing you know, they are able to sell a multi-million-dollar company. And the reality is, there's a lot of wrinkles earned, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, in terms of that process. And I try to, in the book and the story, really capture that, because when founders come to me and they're explaining their challenges, and they're saying, is it supposed to be this hard? I'm like, oh, it's definitely hard. It's brutally, brutally hard. And I don't want to disillusion people and think it's easy for everyone else but hard for them, because it's a really, really hard journey. But if you're wired a certain way, or if you work with founders a certain way, that pain is so much better than working a 9-to-5 job. There's an expression that says entrepreneurs will work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40. And it's very, very true. So a couple other things that's notable. I am from the great city of Akron. You guys ever been to Akron? All right, home of Devo, LeBron James, Chrissy Hines, and me. There we go. By the way, I just watched a great documentary on Devo on Netflix, so watch it if you haven't had a chance. Oh, Devo fan? Okay, great. All right. Anyways, what's notable about this is I moved to North Carolina. My wife and I, we were teachers in South America. We've been living overseas, and we chose to live in specifically the Raleigh-Durham area kind of randomly. We were living overseas. We were 25 years old. We wanted to live to a different part of the country that was warmer than Akron and warmer than northern New Jersey, and we kind of just picked picked it, not really knowing a lot, but having read a lot of favorable things in Best Place to Work, Best Place to Live, in these national magazines. So it just speaks to, when we talk about ecosystems, that top of the funnel marketing is really, really important. And if you look at the backstory of, let's say, Red Hat, that was really started by Mark Ewing, he was a young guy who was working for IBM, had no connection to North Carolina other than a job, and moved here after going to school at Carnegie Mellon. So when we build ecosystems, we have to think in terms of multiple layers, and I don't want to discount the importance of that top layer of getting people top of the funnel into your areas based on national press, because they're wired a certain way. They're never going to come up on an economic development report, but we're going to talk about in a second like why there's a certain profile person that is going to build something wherever they end up living, right? And how do you kind of capture more of those kind of people? So after that, grew up, born and raised. I went to Harvard, which I didn't list here because it wouldn't fit in the line. And then I was a Peace Corps volunteer. That's where I was a teacher in a faraway country called the Seychelles. After moving, and then Ecuador, after moving here, decided to go to UNC and did an MBA program, and then went to go work at pre-IPO Red Hat in very, very early stage. And so the reason I stayed in this area is because I liked it, but also was able to find a really interesting startup before it was famous, right? So all these kind of things, Red Hat in some ways kind of kept me in North Carolina, and Bronto, the company I built, kept other aspiring entrepreneurs. And so there's a spider effect, which is kind of interesting. Started the journey in 2000, even though we incorporated in 2002. So it was a very long journey. Started out of a spare bedroom, and then bootstrapped until I sold it for a few $100 million, many, many moons later. And it got to be quite big. One of the nice things is when you focus on entrepreneurs who build their headquarters here, is they tend to focus their people here too. So we had over 300 people. But we had about 200 and some people sitting at the American Tobacco campus in Durham. So it was very much a Durham-type-based company that we wanted to build here, that we were very focused on the local community. But with time, we opened up smaller offices in London, Sydney, LA, and New York. And it's really powerful that a relatively small company could form a global one at a very small size. So that's a quick snapshot in terms of our size. The Bronto journey, there's a lot there. And it's always hard to capture all the different steps. But two things here. One of them, I did try to capture steps. Yesterday, remember the letter was F? Yeah. Today's better. We're going to G. And so it starts off with the genesis, working out of your house, maybe working with a few other people. You're very much under the radar. You're getting into the grind, where you're really in the thick of it. It's not very glamorous, very hard. But I will tell you one thing that's kind of interesting. Remember yesterday, Eric Boggs was up here on the stage? Remember when Eric, you know how he didn't have any hair? Eric used to have hair. Eric used to work for me in that middle phase. It just speaks to that if you build an entrepreneurial company and it has success, you attract and hopefully build other like-minded people to go off and do even better and greater things. There's a spider effect. And then finally, graduation. How do you prepare if you're going to sell or IPO or do whatever with your company? And the reason I bring up these Gs is because it's very weird there's an entrepreneurial paradox that says what it takes to be an entrepreneur is very different than what it takes to grow a business. And the key thing to be successful in each stage was to reinvent what it takes. What it takes to kind of sit there and code in the genesis phase is very different what it takes to lead several hundred people. Because if you're good at doing every detail here, you're a terrible micromanager here, and you'll never get there. So you have to reinvent. You have to do different games for different times. After the book, someone said, hey, for the last 10 years, you've really been building up these ecosystems. You should call that the fourth G, called gratitude, or give. I'm like, that's great. That would have been good to know before I started the book. So your version of the book doesn't have that, but I do want to make sure you know there's a fourth G in there too. The book focuses a lot on two different models, and I'm going to just breeze through this very quickly. One, we talked tons about the entrepreneurial mindset, and I think entrepreneurial education has really changed. This is not just for entrepreneurs or bootstrapping, it's for modern society. The idea of how do you be nimble, how do you have your kids be successful, and it presents an interesting framework in there that I really, as I look at entrepreneurs and as I assess entrepreneurs, so much has very little to do with their pedigree and has everything to do with their ability to hustle and persistence and open to change. But then it also speaks a little bit to the model. Early on, I said, you can't do all things for all people. And not every business makes sense to bootstrap. You don't just decide, I'm going to bootstrap a pharmaceutical company, right? That's called being a drug dealer. You have to, like, it depends, right? And so you have to be realistic in terms of what the structure is. You also have to be realistic in terms of where you are with your life. And life's not fair, right? And you might have to make certain preparations, and it just might not be in the cards for you if you're not at a certain place in your life, right? And so I think it's taking a hard look and trying to mesh those and see what's realistic for given what type of business you're trying to do, where you are in your life, and whether you have the runway and the business is structured in a way that you could bootstrap it. I think most businesses could be bootstrapped at some level. I think venture capital is widely overapplied and is used as an excuse for a lot of things, but it really depends. All right, so as I said, I do want to do questions. This is really the most important part. This is the give section that would have been really helpful to have that idea before writing this book. I sold this business about 10 years ago, and I stayed for a year or so and then kind of left. So it's really just been about 10 years. And since then, I started a family office called Colopy Ventures, which is one of the sponsors here. And we have this building in downtown Durham, so you can if you ever buy Bull City Burger in downtown Durham, and you look over and you see some steampunk brontosauruses with a Vespa in there, that's our building. But there are a number of things we do to foster entrepreneurship around Triangle, North Carolina. The two I really want to focus on are these, and these people are also in the room. First off is GretBeat. GretBeat is a media publication. We recently became a nonprofit. Krista and others are on the board, which we're widely appreciative of. And the idea is, how do you help the early stage startup? And we talk all day long about we need more money or we need better entrepreneurs. But having been in that phase where you're working out of your house and you have nothing, it's extremely emotionally difficult because all your neighbors and family think you're unemployed and a bum. And they're not wrong, right? But having a story that you can point to and say, look, this is what I do, is immensely powerful. So when I think about ecosystem development, I think as we mature, and depending where you are in the state, you're at the first stage or second or third stage, we kind of need to help in specific ways. So GretBeat is designed to help in one very specific way, is to tell early stage founder stories, right? Not just about you raise $1 zillion, not just about after you've been successful or IPO'd or win the awards. We want to tell your story before that happens because A, it can make connections with others that we can't track, but doesn't mean they're not valuable, maybe for a future employee, future investor, future helper, who knows? But also it validates the entrepreneur. It's like, listen, we know it's hard, and we know like some little stamp of approval of like keep going means something. And that is kind of the basis behind why we do that. So if you look at the articles, you'll see endless profiles on founders covering events like this. We're really trying to help. The second thing that's really important is if we want to showcase interesting things here for outside the region, it's much easier for a journalist outside the region or investor outside the region to look in one place and see a huge density of what's going on and perhaps pick up on things, right? That might be elevated to a larger stage. So that's very important. The third thing is, if we want to make this a great area, as people look at moving here, whether they're like the future Red Hat founders or Epic Games founders or whatever, then they need to feel like this is a great place to be. That if they come here, this is a good entrepreneurial place to do. And it used to be that people would do that with co-working spaces and create physical density, but we can create virtual density of storytelling. So if you go there and you're like, wow, North Carolina, wow, Wilmington, Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, whatever, well, that's where I want to go. That really, really matters. So we can attract the right entrepreneurially minded people that are already in the state to stay, and also outside of the state to come, and we can build long-term great companies that are going to stay and build something really wonderful. So that's kind of the spirit of Greppy. If you're not already signed up to the newsletter, I encourage you to do. We wear red shirts, and so you can kind of see them around. We're easily found. The second thing, Primordial Ventures, if you think about the dinosaur theme, is primordial is like another failed prehistoric theory, right? But we invest in very early stage startups around the state as well. So we have a whole interesting model. So if you're interested in early stage startups, software variety throughout the state, check out Primordial. We think we're doing some pretty innovative things, and we have that team here as well. So there's a lot there. So I think I probably used most of the time, but I do want to see if there's a few questions that I can address. I know I have to breeze through it, but that's how it is. Any questions? No questions from Jim Roberts, please. Thank you.
So you talked about you think that there are different types of startups that might be better for bootstrapping. Do you have any kind of basic criteria that helps with making that?
Well, for example, okay, I'll give you a two-end. So one, I did a software company, and I took 2 years to learn how to code to develop that software. And so one of the things we look for in Primordial is unmetered engineering or software talent. It's very expensive to hire someone to build your product, right? So people have lots of reasons why it doesn't want to be them, and that's fine. But the reality is for software now with AI tools, that bar is even lower. So I would expect there to be more bootstrapping. So that's kind of one aspect. But other aspects, like, we shipped ugly in that our product had a lot of flaws. And I don't even know what I'm doing here. Oops. This is what happens when you give me, okay. So we were able to ship something that was not perfect. And we adjusted very, very quickly. And we took very small customers with very short sales cycles. When we started, our average customer paid us $150 a month. So that's $1,800 a year. Random small businesses, we only focus on businesses around North Triangle originally because we thought those are only ones we'd have a strategic advantage of because we could over-service them. At the end of it, our average customer was $25K a year, and we had clients over $1 million that pay us over $1 million, and they're all over the world. So things change. We made very deliberate choices to be extremely realistic of what customers we think we could close. So even though we had kind of a very strict focus early on, we had very big ambitions. And we evolved. A lot of founders think they set their pricing once and it's got to be forever. It is a journey that evolves, and it's just about getting to the next step. I'm good at giving long answers to short questions. Other questions? Yes. Oh, well, I'm actually not the person that chooses. I just sit here. I can't even do that. So,
being startup myself, I thank you. I just want to say thank you. I guess the question I have though is, there's this speed and growth and kind of tension between going fast and or losing an opportunity. Are there things that you did? You didn't take venture capital. Did you just grow at the pace of what you had revenue coming in? Did you give away equity to strategic hires like sales? Did you take loans? Like, what did you do when you needed a boost, right?
Everyone has a different philosophy. One of the things I hear all the time is we need this money to move faster because there's a window of opportunity. That is BS. Right? I see that all the time. I think if you're building it depends what you're trying to go for. I think in most cases, and that depends on the type of business you're building, right? So we were trying to build a great organization that we knew the technology and opportunity was going to change over time. And we just want to service the customer as well as possible and evolve as needed. So we weren't going for a transaction. We were building a long-term organization. So that's one. So that really so the idea of getting a boost in our model, we felt we could do a lot ourselves. We were able to eventually figure out how to do it ourselves. We were willing to deal with a lot of ugliness. And it was really, really hard, right? I mean, I spent 3 years. I didn't have a paycheck for 3 years. It's really hard. But I think it really depends. At the same time, we were highly focused on growth when we started going. And we know through the whole thing, we had to maintain a certain growth rate to be seen as a high growth business. And even at scale, we are still trying to grow over 30% a year. When you're at $40, $50 million, that's really, really hard to do without outside investment. So I think the answer is it kind of depends. I think VC is really important for a lot of businesses, but I think it's over-applied. I think it's more valuable to build great businesses, and I think people overvalue the changing technology tides for many things, and they undervalue the importance of evolving to whatever the market is. For this business, again, it really, really depends, but it's hard. You know, they say it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I don't know if any of you have run a marathon before. Have any of you ever had a baby before? I haven't. I heard it's even harder, right? So you got me on that one. But it's really, really, really hard. And it's much more of a mental fortitude game than a physical one. Not the baby part of it, but the marathon part. And I think that's part of the challenge. So, how are we on time? Okay. All right, well, I want to thank you very much. I am easily found, and encourage you to enjoy the book. I really appreciate it, and thank you for this forum. I appreciate the Tom and NC Idea Group for giving me this forum to share it with you. Thank you.
I see that.